Good morning, everyone. Good morning, one and all present for this webinar. Uh, we'll be starting it. Varshini, you can, a final year student will be delivering the welcome address.
Can I start, ma'am?
Yeah, start.
When it rains, look for a rainbow, and when it's dark, look for the stars. Likewise, even though when we are going through a rough patch in this pandemic period, try to see the opportunities available and make the best out of it. A very good morning to one and all attending this meeting today. I am Varshini Sriram, final year Instrumentation and Control Engineering at St. Joseph's College of Engineering, which is successfully running its 26th year. I take immense pleasure in welcoming our guest speaker, Mr. Money James, Senior Vice President, Frost and Sullivan, to this event today. Mr. Money James completed his UG at NIT Calicut in the field of mechanical engineering and PG in Xavier Institute of Management and Entrepreneurship in the field of business administration and management. He also did his PMP in project management at Project Management Institute, India. He initially worked as project manager at Mukhand Engineers Limited and Simrise India, formerly known as Dragoco India Limited, from 1997 to 2000 and 2000 to 2002 respectively. Then he worked at Frost and Sullivan as senior research analyst from 2003 to 2004. Then he worked at Ramco System as senior business analyst from 2004 to 2006. Then he was promoted as manager or senior consultant from 2007 to 2008. He then rejoined Frost and Sullivan as program manager and head of business practice from 2008 to 2011 and as regional director Africa in the year 2011 to 2016. He was then promoted as vice president in the year 2016 until now successfully working there and is working as senior vice president from 2018. He has been licensed and certified in digital mastery in social selling and project management professional. He has recently taken up responsibility of the GIC global sales team in India. He enjoys solving problems, designing and innovating newer businesses and delivering consulting engagement and speaking at events and conferences. He is very curious in nature. He likes to play football and badminton. He is a successful person who believes in a Da Vinci's quote. Simplicity is the biggest sophistication. With that being said, I wholeheartedly welcome Mr. Money James to actively engage with our participants today in this event. Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, everybody. It's my absolute pleasure to be here in this webinar. Thank you, each and every one of you in the college, St. Joseph's College, for inviting me. Uh, so I would like to spend my time with you today discussing what are some of those disrupting technologies, and what are some of the trends of the future that you need to be aware of. So this is designed for more for students. You could be a UG student, you could be a PG student, or you could be in a faculty, or you can be in industry listening in. It's the hashtag new normal, and it's like the hashtag new future that we're actually going to be living in. And a kind of thanks to the colleague for my lovely introduction. I was starting to get a bit feel a bit old, but it's quite interesting to know those different times. So one of the important points I just like to highlight here is that at Frost and Sullivan, I play a very active role in working across different strategic clients across the globe in Middle East, in APAC, Europe, and North America. And I enjoy this part where I kind of look at what would be some of the future trends, what would be some of those technologies that would affect some of the customers, and how will they actually imagine this future. So I do a lot of work on strategy building, consulting, and driving the direction of the firms working alongside with the leadership teams. So you can follow me on LinkedIn / Money James, and also on twitter.com. I very usually regularly put up insights that I'm sure you will find it useful. So before I jump in here, I want to just basically give you a bit of what we're going to cover today. I'll kind of give you what are some of those big trends that are disrupting the business, what I believe are some of the impacts that it has on the COVID. And most importantly, I want to spend some time discussing on some specific technologies which I will believe will drive the trends of the future. And what does it mean for you for students? So in case you are a student, you must be wondering, okay, what am I actually going to be learning that's going to be more relevant for the future? And from a faculty or a college management standpoint, you could think about and say, okay, what will be this kind of emerging jobs? And how would I prepare my university or my curriculum in accordance with this changing landscape? And I'm happy to take some questions at the end. So, Frost and Sullivan is a global research and advisory firm. We've been around for close to 60 years, and we work with quite a variety lot of clients, the Fortune 500s and the big marquee clients. So we kind of understand one important aspect of any client, which is to help them grow their business. So that's the fundamental premise of why we exist. And how do we support clients? We analyze close to 38,000 plus product categories, 12 mega 50 technologies that disrupts the industries. So we, on a constant basis, we track these industries for these trends and technologies. And as a result of that, we're able to deliver transformational growth strategies to support organizations with their transformation agenda. And it could be a point where clients would say, I would like to now deliver a business case, which is relates to an engineering problem, or they talk about how they would want to develop their business and grow forward. And we focus on emerging growth opportunities to help them through turbulent times, like what we're doing through COVID right now, and look at the supporting them with mergers and acquisitions and investment support. And with this new normal, you also realize that most of the world is now moving towards a digital strategy, and we also help them develop those strategies. So this is just a kind of glimpse of what we do, and we kind of look at these industries, if you may, that helps you identify this for the future. So I know you are from the instrumentation group, but you will see that obviously we classify instrumentation that comes under instrumentation, industrial automation and process control. But mind you, this industrial automation process control isn't restricted only to this specific group, because it can go into energy and environment, it can be in electronics and security, it can be in aerospace and defense, it can be in automotive, it can be in measurement and instrumentation. It's across metals and in healthcare, it's across different industries that you'll find the applications. So if you actually look at this picture, this is even before COVID happened, right? This has got nothing to do with COVID. So you would look at these companies that are on the right side, likes of the BSNL, Jet Airways, and Walmart. And if you look at these companies that I've put up equally on the left side, my company chairman, Mr. David Frickstead, he calls it a Kodak moment. Don't prepare for a Kodak moment. You should avoid that Kodak moment. What did Kodak do? Kodak invented a digital imaging processing technology many years ago. And when they were about to commercialize this, they didn't actually feel that this would actually make a big commercial sense. So they dropped the idea. And guess what has happened? The digital imaging took over, and eventually Kodak became bankrupt. Likewise, you'll see BSNL, they had a different business model. They had never thought about data as a business model. But Geo came up with data as a business model. You know how Geo is now taking on a big market share from BSNL. Jet Airways is another example where they had a very standard conventional business idea, and Indigo came and disrupted them and saying, look, we are talking about a low cost, no frills airline, which you might actually want to fly. You'll be on time. So they didn't give you all the jazz of it, but they made sure that you want to get from point A to point B. And Amazon and between Walmart, although Walmart has a larger market share, but Amazon is actually proving the technology game is the game to play. So they are calling themselves a big technology bandwagon, and how they are upsetting the likes of Walmart. So why am I talking about all of these trends? So just the example I showed you earlier on, it's pretty clear that some of these trends and uh, the insights that I showed you are happening regardless of whether we like it or not. I'm sure if the faculty members listening in, they can relate to the fact that it doesn't, nobody uses those tape recorders anymore. We don't listen to CDs anymore. Gone are the days when you have these dial phones. It's all gone because these are megatrends that are transformative in nature. It's global in nature, and it has far-reaching impact on business, society, economic, cultures, and personal lives. So it's got a quite a range of what you might call in terms of the way it's going to impact you. So you might be sitting in an instrumentation department trying to figure out, okay, what was the future technologies and how does it going to impact me? Because if you look at it here, the urbanization trends, it's now changing everything in terms of how do you conceive city as a customer. So post COVID, the way that instrumentations and control procedures will, I mean, the controls will happen, sensory applications will be a rise in every building that you could think of. So you would every building want to be automated. How do you actually provide automation services? Okay, so how do you provide sensory services in terms of being hygienic, and giving the workplace a more well-being kind of a feel? So these are big trends, and as you see here, and we also track a number of different technologies around the world. And we have got 9 technology programs that we run, studying each and every technology. For just to get to this top 50 technology, we understand and we track about 2,000 plus technologies. So we bring that all into this equation and try to understand, okay, what does it mean from a health and wellness standpoint, energy and utilities, environment. But if you look at from your the topic of our discussion today, which is more on sensors and instrumentation, what kind of biosensors, the touchless sensing, smart haptics, ADAS, and electronic skin, how are these technologies that are going to drive this into the future? Uh, if you ask me, what are some of those key technologies that you absolutely need to be taking big notice of? I would say here is all these ones, but you can already see that COVID has brought all these technologies into the foray, like big data, blockchain, AI, 3D, circular economy, resource scarcity. There's always mind reading machines, virtual currency. You all have the bitcoins in there. Autonomous robots are already in function right now. AR and VR is taking the world by storm right now. IoT, industrial Internet of Things and manufacturing 4.0. And you can nanobots and you can take 4D printing. Everything is now becoming more relevant. And the COVID has made sure that we will accelerate the implementation of these technologies. So how do you go about making sense of this? If you had listened to this webinar today and you said, like, I want to take 2 things away from here. One most important thing here is that the technology is here to stay and it's going to be a major disruptor. So if you don't understand how the future is going to play out, you actually have not understood technology first, because technology is the key enabler of all these changes that's going to happen in the future. So you got to first look at this kaleidoscope. Is the first step that you look at saying, okay, what are the different technologies? Then you look at, all right, what are the big megatrends that are going to drive these the change, right? And then you come about saying, okay, now what would be some of the business models? So if you just looked at the example of that I gave you of Geo, so they understood, okay, now there is a 4G technology, there's 5G technologies, they're going to play out. There's going to be a huge play on big data. They have data analytics, predictive analytics. So they understood technology. They know that the trend towards data, connectivity, and convergence is going to be there for the future. And what they did was they came up with a different business model. So I don't know if you have started to see how they rolled out the business in India. They gave free data to everybody. Say, look, this is free. Take it for free. It's a freemium model they started with, and slowly started to mock it more into a subscription kind of a service, which is now proving to be a major game changer for them. So, and if you look at it from here, this just doesn't attract just one industry, it affects many industries. And then you got to be part of the ecosystem where you could end up creating an industry. So, in a nutshell, I want you to keep this picture in mind because most of the changes that you will encounter as a student, most of the kind of the shift in your teaching methodologies that as a faculty that you're going to be listening in is the fact that these are fundamental changes that are happening and will continue to disrupt, and that's where the innovation is going to happen. Whether we like it or not, we are truly in the industry revolution of 4.0 digital transformation. We started from the steam engine to Henry Ford's T model in the 90s. In 2000, we started about Industry 3.0. So you want to call it whatever name you want, but Industry 4.0, the era of digital transformation is truly here because of, and I think again say that the COVID has become a major disruptor, and it's also providing it to be the major kind of a change in which they are driving this digital transformation, which, by the way, is not a bad thing in my view, but it gives you a load of opportunities for students like yourselves to come out and actually imagine a different world, which probably your seniors, also just as the batch that passed away, they might not even thought about. So I've kind of given you the innovation kaleidoscope that you could think about in your mind as to which technologies you need to follow, what kind of industries you need to follow, what kind of technologies and trends that you need to follow that's going to give you these opportunities. So if you look at it in here, it's pretty simple. Every company is going to become a technology company. So you've been an engineer, I think you're in the right place, but it's not about, okay, I did so much amount of work, but actually it's going to be measured of in terms of the outcomes. For example, banks, which was traditionally used to just deal with currency, now they are themselves calling a technology company because now they see that there is so much of technology at play, and you can see the number of patents that's been filed by the different financial institutions, and you'll see why there is a big technology war that's going out there because everybody wants to beat every other companies in technology, which is what in an earlier example I gave you, which is what Amazon did in terms of understanding how does this technology going to change this. And if you look at the entire ecosystem of what Amazon operates, they play in place practically every sphere of the technology, and that's what they call as the key differentiator. So I gave you some examples of some of those technologies that are the trends that are driving it. I will say the most important ones, I mean, I can't cover all of them, but I will say my personal favorites are big data, blockchain, AI, 3D printing, autonomous robots, and AR. And it's also for a good reason, because if you look at the big data aspect of it, I mean, we are moving from a date from, we talked about gigabytes, we talked about terabytes, we talked about petabytes, we talked about zettabytes. There's also something called as corabytes. So it's just getting to the point where just data is going to be the huge differentiator in any game people are going to play. And the next one I talked about is AI, and the way that AI is being rolled out, and you can see the number of patents again that are filed by different companies in this space, which is the number of maximum of patents that is being filed at the moment. So AI is a big game changer, and another reason why 5G is becoming very, very crucial and critical is because of the fact that the latency in which that we have been operating, it's going to be pretty intense. We could, I'm not asking you to do it, but you could possibly download a movie just in a matter of seconds just before your classes start. I'm not telling you to do it, but I'm just telling you it's possible that the speed in which you're going to experience the internet is going to be phenomenally different. So that again brings about a very different business opportunity. And just one area like healthcare, we could actually talk about how the different trials are already underway, and how we see this as a massive 1.1 trillion market that is just enabled because of healthcare in 5G. Uh, Being in instrumentation students, I know you don't just talk about specifically on automotive, but you look at from an automation standpoint, it's already going to be a major market where you're going to see how the, uh, the way in which the automation is going to change. When in 2011 we were talking about just taking self-driven cars, now we are actually going to a point in 2030 where you actually could get, say, full autonomous driving. So you could come to Chennai Central and you could just book your vehicle. In 2035, a scenario could be that you could say, look, close your eyes, and there is a car in front of you. You're sitting there, close your eyes and say, take me to my home. That's it. It should know your home is in Ashok Nagar or in KK Nagar, and it'll actually go drop you there. It's a very utopian scenario. I know it's not going to happen in India in time soon, but the way in which automation is happening, the way the level of the level of autonomicity that we are about to achieve. Tesla has already announced that we are getting to the stage 5, which is like total autonomous driving, and that is a very scary proposition as far as our country is concerned. But that's what the global world is moving towards. So this is all fine, and as my person who introduced me mentioned, this doom and gloom is what you got to look for sunshine. So in the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity, and I think to the large extent, this new opportunity horizon that you will see uh, as a result of Corona is going to be a major one. And I think specifically for students like yourself, looking to saying, look, what does this mean for me? How does this new Corona change the proposition in terms of what you're going to see? I'll spend some little bit of time just giving a little bit of perspectives on what is the changing growth economic environment as far as India is concerned, because it's quite an important one for you to understand. Uh, Although the global recession is now very definite, we are going to be in for a very, very long recession globally, and it's important for you to understand that these the global trends with regards to the economics are very, very scary at this point of time, but the recovery is due. Now, it's not like we're going to be sitting in this position like forever. And specifically in India, I believe that we should hit at least by the end of next year, early 2022, we should be actually at least in the 3.5 to 4% GDP growth rate, because it's very important to you to understand, because that's what the growth opportunities are going to start to come by. So I will say there's a lot of debate between whether we'll have a V-shaped recovery or a U-shaped recovery. And I think there could also be a possible of two V's or a W-based recovery. There are many industries in which you will be walking into that are going to be impacted by COVID. So you will look like things like manufacturing, which has got a high impact right now. And that's what most of the instrumentation kind of jobs there are like right now. And you look at industries in India that will survive, will be the high-tech manufacturing, kind of utilities kind of space in which automation is going to be a major mainstay. And if you are thinking about which are the other kind of industries that are not going to be impacted, anything that's got to do with digital will have very minimal impact at this point of time. So the very fact that you and me are interacting on an online platform, which is a learning platform, which is going to be the new normal for some time, it's going to be an industry that's going to thrive. But there will be industries that will struggle, and unfortunately, it will be the local line of manufacturing, the kind of capital goods manufacturing, textile industries, chemical manufacturing, those kind of companies that are going to be struggling. But it is not that it's going to stay like this forever. So we are going to see an upswing, but the time, albeit, is going to be very slow in terms of what is going to come out. So I will say that with the emerging high growth areas of focus for the future, uh, all those sectors that I've listed here have got something to do with digital transformation, and I think it's why fundamentally why every company that has got a business model which is based on digital, are likely to thrive. So I wanted to take some time to kind of look at what will be some of those areas. I mean, I think specifically from an industrial standpoint, where you will see that since ICT drives all of this transformation, you will see that most of the industries that are going to be based on the key elements of digital transformation, you'll start to see that in India, at least for the foreseeable future, it's going to be a downward trend, except for the consumer telecom services. And you will see that the ICT sector in India, there is going to be a huge challenge with regards to limited ICT resources. So I think from where you stand, you will be have to skilled on trained manpower that we will find a challenge. There's going to be regulatory roadblocks. You're going to have a lot of projects that is going to be delayed by digital transformation, and what kind of manufacturing IIoT kind of projects that normally would have not taken a big, I would say, a step in the boardrooms, they're going to start to see a comeback right now. So I would see that there's a lot of opportunities for the future success in light of what's happening with COVID-19. And you will see that the companies will start to heavily will implement and invest on major technologies in terms of collaboration solutions, voice security, cybersecurity, advanced threat protection solutions. You will look at companies wanting to do a major risk analysis of their manufacturing operations. They're looking at things like, okay, is my post-COVID strategy good enough? Is my instrumentation and my overall strategy is in line with the global standards that we are offering? And they're also going to start reviewing a lot of these business models they are operating right now. So you look at some of those technologies just from an ICT sector standpoint. We can talk about, I already mentioned this to you about AR, VR. I talked to you about video conferencing, software-defined technologies, and how 5G is going to make an impact. What I want to really spend a time with you is, okay, how do you, as a student, as a faculty, how do you prepare for this new normal? Because I think it's a more critical element. So up until this time, I told you there are big trends, there are big technologies that are going to affect you. Then I also told you, okay, there is going to be an impact on COVID on the industries, some positive, some negative. So now you could be sitting as a student and as a learner, and you could say, look, okay, this is all fine. What does it mean for me? How do I actually prepare for this new normal? There are a number of different studies that we have done at Frost & Sullivan, trying to understand how will this education sector itself will move. Okay, so that's one aspect I wanted to quickly highlight to you before pointing out to you on AI technology, which I think is going to something that I want to really spend some time on. So you have, as a student, you have massive open online MOOC courses that are going to provide you with whatever current content. So your teachers, I mean your professors and lecturers, they're going to be giving you some learning. In addition to that, if you are wanting to gain more exposure, there's already loads of courses that are available. There is a personalized learning element, which as a student, you could be listening saying, look, I want to actually be given very specific personalized data. What the faculty could also use is these kind of methods to understand, okay, it's not a one-size-fits-all learning model, but how do I actually adapt this and give every student a specific study plan? And you're also going to get a lot of digital learning services, which is going to be ones that are going to be already being rolled out in many organizations because of COVID. AR and VR is something that most of the content creators and hardware vendors in education will need to catch up on. There is already a lot of investment going on, but the traditional higher education degrees has to become more flexible I think the new education policy is also driving us towards that. So look at the data-driven approach and how the education institution itself will transform more from being a brick and mortar model. It's going to be more digital transformation that is going to change. And again, a lot of focus on the Internet of Things and how do you kind of have a digital ecosystem, which is a classroom, and how do you address disruption. So when we did the study back in 2018, we thought about how the education sector itself would transform. So this is more for the faculty to understand that a lot of big data and analytics, because of the increasing number of devices, you're going to see quite a lot of uh, areas that is focused on big data and analytics will merge into AI, and it will how it will break down the silos. It's been drawing into more predictive and prescriptive insights on the digital service data. So you would be able to drive a lot of data and say, okay, now what does it mean? Blockchain, you could actually encrypt a lot of student records to be stored in blockchain and cryptocurrency platforms that could actually start to change in the future. And you could do cloud computing, cloud solutions that will allow seamless movement between devices and platforms. Um, so, and the AI and machine learning, where you will see there is a lifelong journey is mapped, forecast, and planned by advanced AI systems that's tied to data sets from connected devices and public data sets. And I think the most important and the exciting part of here is in terms of looking at what is the change towards quantum computing, where you'll have the encryption on historical data that is going to expose millions of student records. So that is the future of what we see is a change in the education pattern. So I'm gonna stop here and kind of give you a little bit of a sense of, okay, I told you earlier on, artificial intelligence is going to impact these categories. There's one technology that I thought will become a major influencer in the scheme of things going forward. So what I would say here is, you look at as a student, you look at the kids here and say, you've got multiple access now to understand, okay, where and all the different opportunities can come for you. So you could say, look, I'm focusing on artificial intelligence. You could be in the automotive side. You could be in from an R&D perspective. You could go into an ecosystem that will use AI. You could be into companies that are looking to say, I want to make some new investments for the future. Or you could actually go into specific industries that are actually focusing on how to actually tackle AI. So, for example, you look at artificial intelligence as a technology, it's got a range of solutions for different applications. So you could say, okay, now I'm going to talk about using, okay, you're working, let's say, into a manufacturing industry where there's going to be instrumentation, you're going to be with a lot of sensors. Okay, now you get a lot of this data, and how do you actually make sense out of this data? How do you do predictive analytics? So you can do different models that learn from data, and you can provide insights and predict what's going to happen, the outcome. The next important one here is that from an AI standpoint, you could look at some pattern recognitions. You could say, okay, now there are a lot of algorithms that are written to understand, okay, what will be the amount of the mass amount of data that you have, but you can understand what are the different underlying trends. Is it finding a pattern? For example, there is drones that are coming mainstream right now. So if you look at drones, so we are working with some of the companies that provide these technologies. So what we're trying to do here is, let's say these drones, they fly over a certain set of crops in the agricultural technology space. You look at this, that many crops have got different types of diseases that it's an occurring pattern which the farmers and the big growers are not able to solve. So what these will be able to go here is they'll be able to fly over this. They'll be able to take high resolution photographs, and they'll be able to predict and say, okay, they can be able to find out that there is a pattern of disease that's in a certain segment. And what they could then do here is to kind of recommend, based on analytics, they could recommend, okay, now you need to spray pesticides on a specific area. So how do you actually develop these kind of algorithms? And most of what you're going to see in terms of where the voice assistance usage is going to be is to how do you bring the natural language processing abilities to interactive sessions with machines. You already have loads of examples of those. I'm sure in your house you have Alexa, Google Homes. It's already there. You have your Siri phones, Google Assistant. It's already there. In terms of cybersecurity, I think there is a massive risk in terms of how it's the way it's rolled out right now. So the historical and the real-time data analysis to detect the risky behaviors by machine or by individuals, because 5G is going to make sure that there's going to be loads of machine-to-machine interaction. The MTM machine learning, the process is going to be so quick that machines are going to become more intelligent, but also it becomes a big risky element for us. So this is one thing that I want you to really pay some attention on. And information and visual discovery and extraction is again based on algorithms that kind of pulls information from articles, documents, photos, and looks at natural language processing. And you also have virtual assistants where data can learn, the machines can learn and apply on reasoning, explanation, and advice. And moreover, you're going to be playing around with loads of robots, augmented reality robots. They're already in marketplace. You have already seen examples of how during COVID, how machines are starting to learn, and the robots are using sensors and processes to do a lot of right applications. So I'm sure you've seen in our own state in Tamil Nadu, there are robots that are delivering medicines, they're delivering food to the COVID patients, where they understand that you cannot have human-to-human interaction. And it's been successfully deployed in countries like China in their fight against COVID. So this is a range of applications just based on just one technology that I've just spoken to you about. So just imagine from the different technologies that I mentioned to you on how, from an instrumentation and sensory standpoint, you could actually figure out there are loads of applications that you might not have thought about in the past. It's going to give you job opportunities. So I'm not going to spend too much time on a lot of them, but this is, I've kind of split it down by saying from a financial services standpoint, what would be some of the ways. So I'm not sure, you're not from the instrumentation and services background, but if you look at, let me take an example in healthcare or industry applications. All right, so this is the one I wanted to speak to you about. So if you look at the industrial applications, AI has a role in terms of looking at quality control. So as I said to you, how the drones are doing that from an agriculture standpoint, sensors are able to spot the kind of irregularities in assembly lines, and they're able to kind of highlight what is the cause, and they're able to remove it. So they're going to highlight it saying, look, this is exactly the reason why this defect is happening. You look at it from a supply chain standpoint. So data, that's big data that comes from suppliers. They have their own inventories and manufacturing cycles. So you can actually find out saying, look, the most way to optimize this data, instead of avoiding, you should avoid surplus and or shortages. So because of this amount of data that you could process, you actually could use that from an AI standpoint. Predictive maintenance is something that is becoming a key element of every manufacturer right now. So the analysis of operating data and getting sensor measurements will help you to fix those anomalies early and avoid maintenance and providing breakdown. So you saying, look, instead of not me knowing this and getting into a major shutdown, you could actually avoid it. And again, using all of the AI data to talk about resource management and getting into operational data that says, okay, how do you reasonably deploy your resources? So companies like ABB are already deploying this, and you could see from a faculty standpoint or from a student standpoint, you could say how these many applications are going to actually provide new areas or new avenues of opportunities for both of you. I think this is one is pretty important in terms of the home automation I told you about. There's a lot of sensory stuff that is already built in, but one area I want to focus here is about the usage of smart appliances, where you're going to see, because of the increase in COVID, what's going to happen here is a lot of the households are going to turn into more smart appliances. And I mean, you can already see it. You can actually already control your TV with your remote, with your smartphone. You could do that for your air condition. You should be practically able to do that and make your home a more smart driven home. And it's actually got a lot with efficiencies, a lot to do with sensors. And I think there is quite a lot of play in this area. I think India is going to be a major market for it, in my view. And if you are thinking about going into the consumer segment from an instrumentation and sensor standpoint, I think that is very, very relevant. I'm going to skip this because it's more from cybersecurity and attack standpoint, but you will see that the growth opportunities for the future are going to be on how do you develop chatbots, how do you develop visual recognition softwares, develop virtual assistant solutions, and tackle cybersecurity. Uh, so lastly, I would say here is that if you are if you have been listening so far and you kind of understand, okay, where is this going to take me in terms of the future, in addition to whatever you are listening into or whatever you're reading right now so far, you'll also see that these many challenges does exist, but it's going to be a growth that is going to be very imminent. And I think it's something that one important area I would like to focus here is on this element, where there's going to be a huge talent shortage in this in India specifically, on how do you actually develop AI expertise, which means there's a constant exchange that's going to go from academic to, you got to do like projects, you got to come out, and corporates are going to be looking, and companies are looking for people with this kind of skills. And when you walk in with an instrumentation background into a major manufacturing or a manufacturing industry, or heavy industry, you would actually having an AI based learning that you might pick up. It gives you an added advantage, in my view, of how you could actually be of more value to any organization that you would actually want to be employed, or is something that you want to start a business on, or you want to become your own entrepreneur. You could actually look at this area as a focus for the future. I want to just give you a sense of how what is the need of the hour right now. So just an example that I just want to show you is on typically on a sector, which is just a healthcare sector, which has a huge element of technology already imbibed. But you will see that, let's say somebody is using a blockchain as a platform, there's going to be many new types of jobs that are going to start to emerge. So you will see that there is an IoT business analyst. So IoT business analyst doesn't necessarily only have to be in any sector. They can be across sectors. Blockchain engineers can be across sectors. And what you have to understand here is, from a faculty standpoint, you have to now think, okay, now if we are going to talk about producing a blockchain engineer in St. Joseph's, and as a faculty, you could think about saying, what kind of things that you need to be teaching your students at the moment. So you think about, how do you bring machine learning? How do you talk to them about cognitive computing? How do you decentralize the IoT practices? How do you talk to them about new business models? So I think from a technology standpoint and both from a knowledge standpoint, it's both for the students and for the faculty to understand that there is going to be a whole new set of jobs that are going to emerge, and as a result, a whole new market ecosystem for the future that will emerge. And because of that, as students, you also need to change to think about, how do you imbibe some of these technological understanding? How do you develop a good appreciation for it while you're completing your degree? And also for the faculty to understand what kind of new syllabuses, kind of topics that you could actually bring in into the teaching curriculum that will help you to prepare your students and the university for the future. So you could think about the design thinking method, in which how you could say, okay, from a university is concerned, department is concerned, you could say, I'm going to take machine learning as one idea, I'm going to prototype it, I'm going to test it, and I'm going to bring it back into the curriculum and see how this is going to make sense. So that's something that you could do as a from a design thinking method standpoint. Is there a tool that you could use for yourself? So, so in conclusion, I want to just talk to you. We spoke about the megatrends. I told you there are big 12 megatrends and 50 technologies that are going to change the world. The COVID has had some impact. It's going to build a medium to long term impact for you, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's not of doom and gloom. It is going to provide you with new opportunities. So in this area that you are in, you pick up one technology, two technologies that you believe that this will help you in your line of thinking for the future, and you should start following those technologies and understanding how that could actually bring you job opportunities, and how do you actually start preparing for them. And as a faculty and as a university, how do you imbibe some of these important learnings to your students right now that could help you prepare them for this new normal and for this future. So with that, I'm gonna stop and hand it back over to Abhimala and team. But as I said earlier on, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, and you can look me up on LinkedIn, and I will, to the best of my ability, answer your questions. And also, if I don't know the answers, I'll find an answer for you and give it to you wherever I can. With that, I'm going to stop now and hand it back to the team. Thank you. Hello, Vimala?
Yes, sir. We'll let you know the questions. We have given time for the participants to post their questions in the chat box.
So while they're listening in,
People are telling that it is a good topic and it is great to hear it. So there is a question from one of the participants. Can you brief about the career opportunities in Frost and Sullivan?
oh yeah, so you look at how we track about 12 different industries, and one is obviously there is a big focus on instrumentation because of a lot of work that we do on the industrial automation side. So, so if you are a fresher and you've just moved out or going out, I think what you I mean, obviously there are different requirements that we have when we look at. Okay, it's not just we just don't look at just saying, look, are you just focused only on instrumentation elements? We also want you to develop a little bit more understanding about the business, right? So, what are some of those business applications that you think is very relevant? So, so if you are a person wanting to grow yourself in the consulting world, I think develop a more detailed understanding of those industries that you are wanting to tackle, and you should bring those kind of ideas and look at how do you differentiate yourself in this process. And I'm sure the hiring managers, they will definitely look at it more favorably. So just to clarify, we just don't look at only at, okay, have you just scored excellent marks? That's not the only thing that we look for, by the way.
Thank you, sir. There is another question. What will be the post-COVID scenario on career opportunities for a fresher students?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. So I believe that the current immediate or the kind of short to medium scenario is that it's going to be very tough. No mistake, make no mistake. That's because more and more companies are uh, withholding their investments. They're wanting to wait and watch and try and figure out, okay, how is this going to change the future? Or what do we do with it? So I think till up until the end of December, you're going to find a lot of companies not making major decisions. But what I can promise you here is that a lot of companies are now starting to prepare for this next uh, wave and trying to go say, how do they actually kickstart their own growth projects and prospects. So because of that, you're going to see many people will want to look at freshers in that standpoint of how do you bring some interesting ways of solving problems. So I know it's difficult for you to sit and think, oh, I'm a fresher. How do I know what's happening in an industry? But I think this is what I think the world needs right now. We need more problem solvers and thinkers to come up with some creative solutions. So you have some creative ideas and how you could actually tackle a problem. I think that is something that will be very welcome. And I think as I mentioned during my talk, if you pick up areas and see how these different technologies can bring about solutions for the industry, I think that is something that you will actually do yourself a big favor to uh, get your job prospects pretty higher. So if you go with a standard method and saying, look, I'm looking for a traditional approach to looking at things, it's going to be more tougher. So I will say the short immediate term, it's going to be tough. But if you come up with some very creative solutions, and I think there's going to be a huge opportunity for somebody who is willing to do that.
There is another question. You had mentioned about V and U type recovery of economy. Can you please give some inputs on W type recovery?
Yeah. So there's two V's, right? So what has happened here is now the supply chain has dropped. The supply side has dropped in terms of the whole area. So that's the downward curl that you was sort of the V. And then you talk about a slow recovery that will happen from the demand side. And as this demand picks up because of the supply that is dropped, the demand will go up. And while it kind of peaks, there is going to be a second wave of COVID that might hit. I think it's going to start again. We're already starting to see this second V happening across the different geographies right now. So there is China is getting into this second wave now. Many European countries are back into the second wave now. So a W is a very unlikely scenario that will happen around the world. But most of what is happening here is it's come down quite dramatically. And if there is no second wave, we will just see only one V. Otherwise, we'll end up seeing two Vs. So that's what I mentioned by a W at this point of time.
Thank you, sir. There is another question. What are the soft skills expected from a college passed out?
Brilliant question. So, well, tenacity, being more curious, I think in my view is very important. Uh, where you need to be able to coming up with different problem solving ideas. So not just looking at problems just from a standpoint of saying more from an engineering standpoint, but also you got to have a knack to spot if there is something is not in line with what you're thinking. You should be able to question it. So this questioning technique is one, a good skill to have, a more curious mind, in my view, is a very, very important skill to have. And I think it's a lot of interpersonal skills. I think although the COVID has made it impossible for us to do a lot of interpersonal work, but I think how do you be more digitally more relevant? How do you be more digital savvy, digitally more interpersonal, right? So the digital personal could be a new word that you could think about. And I think the most relevant one here would be to say, look, be very authentic. Okay, be yourself. Okay, so many times people try to be a different avatar, a different persona. It doesn't have to be. You just have to be yourself in terms of saying, okay, how do you actually bring about a subtle change or difference in what you when you are in the room or when you are in the kind of digital space. I think is to be that person who everybody wants to kind of be around with. So I think the being more curious and actually developing a knack for looking at problems and coming up with different solutions, being more open-minded and developing good interpersonal skills. And these are some of the soft skills as a fresher that actually you definitely need to have.
There is another question. Do you collaborate with college for developing a new technology?
Oh yes, oh yes. So I think it's an important part of our equation right now. Um, it's like you mean as at Frost and Sullivan, we don't do it directly, but we actually we are part of many ecosystems that because R&D institutions and academia with governments, actually academia are actually more interrelated. So so you could actually be sitting in your college. You could come up with in an R&D part. You could say, look, I'm actually talking about this technology. So how do you actually validate that? So you need to have a tie up with a institution that will help you to understand this more in detail, and that's where you start to developing lab scale, pilot scale projects that helps us to. So we are part of those ecosystems, and we actually understand how this whole thing works. So yeah, if you got some interest ideas, we could definitely help you find a right R&D company that does R&D in that space, and we could actually develop that ecosystem. So as Frost and Sullivan, we don't directly invest in this, but we actually support this ecosystem.
Oh. So there is another question. How India can catch up with technology gap with developed countries?
This is probably the question of the day for me. It's a very interesting question, by the way. Uh, I would say we have already been technology laggards. I mean, let's face it here. We don't, for example, if you take a country like US, they spend close to 10 to 15% of their GDP on technology and on R&D. In India, we hardly spend 2%, if at all, we spend. So there is definitely a huge gap in which what we do. So having said that, the government is currently kind of opening up a lot of avenues for us to develop technologies. So how do we beat that? Is we have to develop indigenous technologies. We have left a very limited option. I think the moment you use Google, the moment you use any kind of other Apple or any other products, it's somebody else's technology that we are using. So there's royalty, there's a lot of stuff that there's money outflow out of a country that is going to be inevitable. So you have to develop indigenous technologies, and you have to understand how this is actually implemented in a market ecosystem like what you do in India. Although I don't work with a lot of Indian clients, but I think my sense here is that having worked with global companies and multinationals around the world, my feeling here is that the time has come for India now to put their foot down and saying, look, we're just not going to copy technologies or just not going to follow technologies. Sorry, we're just not going to follow technologies, but we're actually going to develop some technologies on our own. And I think that's the only way we are going to catch up. I know it's a tough ask, but there are already some offshoot. There's already some green shoots that I can see happening in many spaces at the moment. Agriculture technology is one area that I can see India is really starting to turn the corner. So I think slow and slow, you will see that the government's self-reliant India program will start to drive these kind of things in for the future. So yes, developing indigenous technology is the only way for us to tackle, and for that there needs to be a fundamental shift in way in which academia will play a big role. Like yourself, colleges like yourselves, you got to play a major role in that, because that's where I think we are sorely missing the point in terms of not a lot of thinkers are coming who are coming up with new ideas and new ways to solve problems that could unearth new technologies for the future.
Yes, sir. There is also a question which is similar to the earlier one. Post-COVID, what will be the future of entrepreneurship in India, taking into account the status of present Indian economy?
Yeah, entrepreneurship is a tough game. Without even in the earlier stages, there are loads of companies that as a startup ecosystem didn't thrive. And that's purely because a lot of the policies that were put in place were not conducive. I believe it's changing and will change quite a lot. And I think it's going to be an entrepreneur game in my view going forward. So you will, if you are if you're thinking about different ideas, and there are ways to do it, I think this is the time now, because the traditional forms of employment is going to change. So you got to business models, things like gig economy is going to be very, very common. People are not going to be full-time employed. They want to do part-time jobs. They want to do interesting jobs. So I think the business model might see a big change going forward, and I think entrepreneurs have a major role to play in that. So uh, keep a lookout on all these startup ecosystems and look at for some of the major changes that are happening right now. Right now, it's very tough. I agree, but post-COVID, because of the way the government is looking at kickstarting the economy, I think it has to be entrepreneurs who actually can create more jobs. It cannot be the regular industries that will say that we will be able to create more jobs, because it needs a new thinking and some new initiatives to create all of these new jobs for the future.
This is the final question for today's session, sir. At this situation, is it advisable for students to take up their masters or continue with their job?
Well, I'm sure professors and the esteemed HOD and dean will have a better viewpoint on this. But in my view, education is going to be the major differentiator. So if you're saying, look, there is an area of passion that you're saying, look, I'm going to be more technical. I actually want to unearth this part. Uh, Spending 2 more years for your masters to come up with something very unique, it's going to be worth your while, because this job market right now, let's say in the short to medium term, is going to be very, very challenging. So you could use this time to actually to finish your masters, and you could come there, or you could say, look, let me do some kind of a small stint and then get into some kind of a master's program. That also could be there. But I will say that if it's an area that's they're extremely passionate about, I think you should pursue masters. I mean, that's my view. I mean, as I said, it's your personal circumstances that you should be thinking about. But there is a good possibility that some kind of degree of specialization in some kind of technologies that you are willing to put your hands on, that could lead you into a more sophisticated spot, and to look for a new job opportunity or for a new area of entrepreneurship.
Thank you, sir. Uh, that's it, sir. There are no more questions.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you for putting your inputs. Now I invite Ms. Bershing from final year IC to vote the vote of thanks.
Good day, all. I deem it a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks on this memorable occasion. Let me first of all start by giving glory to the Almighty God for making today's occasion a resounding success. I thank our special guest, Mr. Money James, Senior Vice President, Frost and Sullivan, who has spent his valuable time with us enlightening with very useful information. The concepts of how to prepare for the new normal, digital transformation in education, AI growth catalysts, and as solution, growth opportunities in the future were explained very clearly. I ensure you, sir, the session was very informative and our participants are going to make the best out of it. I sincerely thank our college chairman and managing director, principal sir, dean ma'am, and our department HOD sir and staff members for organizing such an amazing event for the betterment of the students. Last but not the least, I give my warm hearted thanks to the active participants who have been cooperative and attentive throughout the session and helping us make this session a resounding success. Finally, I leave you this inspiring quote by Martin Luther King. An individual has not started living until he rises above the confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. Once again, I thank you all for your kind cooperation and attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashini. Thank you, sir. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
your
sir.
time, sir. It was really very useful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks for you.
Lovely.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you.
I hope we'll be connecting in future years also, sir. Uh,
Sure.
Need
Thank
your
you.
for our students, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vimala. Thank you, Ashwini. Thank you, sir. Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.